Welcome to Wartime CEO, hosted by entrepreneur, CEO, investor, veteran, and adventure seeker, Jason Tirico. A podcast centered around helping you tackle life's battles. Learn essential skills like leadership and sales to creative solutions to deal with personal life issues. Life hits hard sometimes. Fight back with Wartime CEO. And now, here's your host, Jason Tirico.
Hello and welcome to Wartime CEO. I am your host, Jason Tirico. Our next guest formerly served as an intelligence officer for the CIA and has corporate experience as a VP and Chief Diversity Officer for companies such as SAIC, American Express, and Pitney Bowes. He has served as a senior management consultant advising small businesses and corporate business startups. He is also the co-founder of the National Society of Hispanic MBAs, NSHIMBA, known now as Prospanica, the Association of Hispanic MBAs and Business Professionals. Please welcome Mr. Henry Hernandez. Welcome,
Thank
Henry.
you, Jason. Thank you very much for that great welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on the show. You and I have known each other for quite some time, and, I really had a chance to really look over your bio. The vast knowledge and experience you have is just, it's amazing. I mean, how did you the first question that that kind of comes up to me is, how did you start? Where did all this start? And where did you start, collecting this vast amount of knowledge?
I originally thought I was going to serve in the military, that I was going to be a lifer, probably in the Air Force. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And so even in high school, I started researching, what do you need to do? What do I need to do? And I actually applied to get an appointment to the Air Force Academy. The problem was that I flunked my physical. I had a history of asthma as a kid.
Oh.
I couldn't even get into Air Force ROTC. So that pretty much went away. But one of my high school advisors said, well, you can still go and move forward to study to become a mechanical engineer and still pursue your passion in aerospace and defense. I had a very strong interest in that. So I started out by applying to various schools. I got admitted to Rice University. As soon as I had my admissions letter, my advisor said, "This is the one you want to say yes to. Forget about the others." I didn't realize at the time what that was going to do to me and what it was going to do to set up sort of a stepping stone to further in my career. And so later I decided I wanted to go to graduate business school. Early in my going to study my engineering degree. And I met a guy by the name of Fernando Inzunza, who ended up becoming a great, not only a mentor, but a friend and a contact. And he put the bug in my ear. He was an MBA candidate at Stanford, and he put the bug in my ear. And then it took a while before it took. It was about almost 5 years after I graduated as an undergrad. And that's when I started developing that passion, I think, also for seeing more diversity in the workplace, certainly in graduate business schools. And then from there, it just sort of took off. I had that interlude at the CIA, which was, people asked me, why the CIA? I said, I've always had an interest in military. I didn't know that much about the intelligence community, but I had a friend that actually applied. He gave me their contact information. Next thing I know, I'm flying to DC to get interviewed. And then 3 months later, I'm stepping in through the portal of the entrance to the CIA.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So when you were, you wanted to be a fighter pilot and you found out, I guess your asthma was kind of that point that said, okay, yeah, you can't go do that. I mean, I'm sure, especially at that age, that was probably a huge disappointment. You probably felt rejected. How did that make you feel?
The good news was that my dad, who was a paratrooper, he was in the 11th Airborne, and he continued to support me. He said, well, maybe you can get into Air Force ROTC. So I started going down that path. I even took the exam for Air Force ROTC, but then I got rejected again for the same reason, because I had a history of asthma. Wow. And I think it was a disappointment, but I thought, you know what, that's just one stumbling block. Let me look to see what else I can do. And that's when continuing in my studies and pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering was kind of what really kind of got me energized and focused. And that's, going to Rice University was probably one of the biggest, certainly was at the time, the biggest academic challenge I'd ever had, because I was competing with kids that took AP Calculus, AP English, advanced placement and other studies. And, I was lucky to get some of the basics in my high school at Baylor High School.
Right.
But it was still a really good challenge. I'd never lived away from home. I was one of the first kids in my family to move away to go to college. So I always, I didn't look at any of these things as things that were going to stop me. I just saw them as just being a challenge. And trying to just tackle them head on was really kind of what my family encouraged me to do. And even to this day, I still kind of see the same thing. I mean, even this current environment of pandemics and social unrest and, all these other things.
Certainly.
They're just new challenges. How you deal with them is up to you.
No, that's great. Yeah. So we just finished another podcast where we talked about, rejection and dealing with rejection and staying motivated. And our stories are somewhat similar. When I first started out at a high school, my goal, I just wanted to be a Marine. That's it. That's all I ever wanted to do in life. But I went down the path of trying to get to the Naval Academy, and I had received a congressional nomination. Now, I was a decent student, but I wasn't the best student, right? And I'm always been a horrible test taker, because I'm just very analytical to the point where I'm over analytical. So I'll overthink it a lot of times. And my SAT scores were never high enough, right? So they were like, well, if you can get your SAT scores high enough, we'll get you an appointment, but I couldn't do it. So, when I got that rejection letter, it was kind of, it hurt. But it didn't stop me. I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to enlist and I'm just going to keep pushing forward. And I think it's important, that people know, especially like younger folks, that are listening to the show, that disappointments, those challenges, they're always going to be in your way, and it doesn't matter. Just keep pushing forward. You're just going to, move on to the next thing, figure out a way, it'll happen. So, I think one of the things, and you kind of even talked about it a little bit, was, your experience as an intelligence officer at the CIA. I mean, that's such a very, niche group of people. You probably count, how many intel officers there are out there, and have served as intel officers. How did that prepare you for life in the corporate world?
I don't think I really understood the ramifications of me being a CIA intelligence analyst until when I went to graduate business school. And it was when I was in graduate business school that I started realizing, all this training and some of the things that I had to do as an analyst are actually helping me in being successful in graduate business school. At UCLA, the Anderson School where I attended, every MBA candidate had to present in front of a group of either professors, and then also there was an instructor responsible for communications. Because if you didn't present well, you had to go through, I don't want to say a remedial course, but it was basically a course to help build a foundational block so that you could present well.
Right.
So I'm giving a presentation, and in the back, I'm looking at one of the professors talking to the instructor in communications. And I thought, I'm either doing really well or I've really screwed up. So when I went up, after I was done, they gave us a feedback session. As soon as I went up there, the instructor for communication said, "Where did you learn to present?" And I looked her dead in the eye and I said, "I was a CIA intelligence officer." She didn't believe me at first. She said, "No, you're kidding me, right?" I said, "No, I was a CIA analyst. I had to present and talk about very technical, detailed types of subjects around weapons, science, to a non-technical audience. I had to present. I also had to write articles on the same types of topics. They're the ones that taught me how to communicate." And she's like, "You're the best one we have seen to date." And that right away said something to me. And then later in some of my courses, where there was certainly a lot of analysis required, I looked at things in a very different way than sort of the typical MBA. I looked at it from a geopolitical perspective. I looked at it from a threat perspective. I looked at it from a risk perspective. And I remember one case study where we were talking about Spain.
Mhm.
And one of the separatist areas where there had been already in the press a lot of issues. And when I presented my case study, I presented the opposite of what everybody else was saying. I was saying there's too much risk for us to invest in this part of the country. I don't think we should do it. These are the reasons why. And I walked through that whole way of sort of linear thinking. And everybody else, all my MBA candidate colleagues thought, no, this guy's, he's wrong. You know, he's not going to get a good grade. The professor's going to tear into him.
Sure.
And after I was done, the professor said, you all need to think the way this guy thinks.
Wow.
He is looking at it in a very different way than what you all are just following that textbook example of how to look at issues. He did not look at it like that.
Wow.
And his decision for you not to invest in this was actually a sound one. He didn't tell me whether I was right or whether I was wrong,
Right.
but he did reinforce my way of thinking is very different. And even to this day, I look at things from a threat perspective a lot of times.
Sure.
Whether it's something happening in the geopolitical world, something that's happening here where I live, or just sort of simple things. You know, what's the risk of moving forward with making this decision as opposed to taking that decision? And I think that's really helped me a lot, not only in my work, in my education, but also in just sort of daily life.
Sure. So I think, that I think it definitely contributed to your ability to strategically think, right, and kind of develop that very rare skill that so many people lack. How did you take that? How did you apply that in your career? How did you apply that to entrepreneurship? I mean, you've helped a lot of companies grow, from startups and develop, new business units within the corporate environment. How did that grow into that?
I think a lot of the basic elements, certainly the agency experience helped a lot in terms of my way of thinking. But I think going to get my MBA, majoring in finance, majoring in MIS, when MIS was still fairly early. And I think because of my engineering degree, mechanical engineers think very systematically. A lot of times they're referred to as systems engineers. Mm-hmm. So we look at things very holistically. We're looking at systems. And so to do that, really, you do have to look at things from a strategic perspective. You can't look at everything from a tactical perspective. And so I think it's really helped me a lot, whether it's been in industry when I was in the environmental business or as a management consultant, helping a startup develop their strategic plan. I can't tell you how many small businesses that I've talked with or even consulted to tell me, well, we're good at everything. Mm-hmm. And then I challenged them. I said, no, you can't be good at everything. You're only a 300-person firm. What are you the best at? They'll give me a laundry list of 12 things. I say, no, give me the top 3 things that you are the best at. And then that's when it starts getting hard for them because a lot of them don't think about it like that.
Right. So how does one do so not everyone has gone to or followed your path, right? So the average person probably will never work at the CIA, and then a lot of them may have formal schooling or degrees, but how does the average person kind of develop that, strategic thinking and planning their next move, whether it be, in their career or let's say they have a startup, one or the other? I mean, I'm sure there's some basic commonalities advice that you can give.
Yeah, what I always tell people, because one thing about being in business and having been a business professional is not everybody thinks the same way. So you have some very linear thinkers, some that are very nonlinear, some people that can be very analytical and look at the numbers. But what I tell people is, if you think you're not strong in a particular area, develop a mentorship or an advisor in that space that kind of fills that gap, especially in business. Sure. If you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur, or you're involved in a startup and you feel that you really don't have certain skill sets, that's where you have to build that cadre of either informal or formal advisors to really kind of provide those inputs and that content to really strengthen, what you're attempting to do.
Okay. So what about like, how do they go about getting the mentors? I mean, they just find somebody they want to emulate, or, is there, do you have to, like, is there a formal thought process? And this is something that I've had, in my career, I've said, oh, you need to find a mentor. Well, who do I want to be as a mentor? How do I figure that out?
It's probably more of an art than it is a science, because I think too many times mentoring initiatives try to be too systematic and here's the script for it, and that really doesn't work. Probably about 90% of it is chemistry. So what you try to do is through your informal networks, whether it's through school, through graduate school, through business organizations that you might be a part of, professional organizations that you're a part of, start identifying individuals that may not necessarily think like you, but actually may even think more differently than you. And then say, you know what, I really need somebody that can help me in maybe a particular discipline. One area that's far reaching for me, and I haven't had a lot of experience in it, and I'm starting to see a lot more in some of the things that I even do in my business at Melwood, is around agile, Scrum, various methodologies as it relates to project management. I know zero about that stuff. However, I do know individuals that are really good at this stuff. One of the people that I mentored while she was going through a master's degree at Georgetown, she was a master's degree candidate in technology at Georgetown. This is what she knew. And she asked me as she was going through her master's program, where do you think I should focus once I get out of school? And I said, you know what? You're already seen as a subject matter expert in this space. And it's really cutting edge. It's leading edge. Companies are looking for people with this skill set. That's what you should focus on. It wasn't exactly what she was thinking as something that she wanted. But what I told her was, you're coming at it from a position of strength. And I think once you get your master's degree, you'll be able to leverage that. Mm-hmm. So finding individuals that can help mentor you, provide counsel. And sometimes it's just episodic. It could just be for, in this case, I was her mentor for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. After her graduation, there was a transition period where she was trying to figure out where she wanted to land, maybe another year, but it wasn't as frequent, those communications. Today, I'll be lucky if I get a New Year's salutation or a Christmas salutation. I'll send her a note and she'll be ghosting. I don't hear her. But that doesn't bother me because I understood what my role was at that time. It was really more to provide as much consultation and mentoring to her to get her where she needed to be.
Yeah, that's definitely invaluable. And it makes more sense, right? Especially kind of even looking at it in hindsight. I think it's probably more relationship based and, eventually finding someone that you're comfortable with and especially finding somebody who sees value in you, right? That they want to invest that time.
Exactly.
That they haven't, I know when you and I first met and we were talking about, working together on some projects and you one of the first things you approached me with was almost, okay, well, if you need to think about if you want to do this, if you want to do this, I'm in, but yes. You need to prove to me that you're really in, yes. And that was something like 5-6 years ago. And here we yes.
are. Yeah. I think that element of choosing a mentor and also the tone and the tenor of that relationship, there is a difference between someone that's providing mentoring and somebody that's providing coaching. The mentor is generally puts a circle around, this is the scope of the things I'm willing to address. And they may not necessarily always be around professional development. That mentor might actually be providing some advice and counsel as it relates to maybe life changes. Sure. In the case of, my mentor that the mentee I was mentoring, she needed to relocate. She needed to relocate from DC to Minneapolis. And she said, I'm getting ready to start my master's program. I'm thinking about withdrawing. I said, no, you're not. You need to think about this. I walked her through all of the steps. I said, if they're allowing you to be able to complete your master's remotely and periodically you come back to DC to whatever it is you need to do, I would do that. Right. And so she ended up moving forward. She didn't drop out of the master's program. She's finished her master's program a little over a year ago. And now she's working for a management consulting firm, Accenture.
Wow, that's amazing. That's something I definitely wanted to talk to you about because, especially in this day and age, entrepreneurship is, almost like a new fad, right? Everybody's trying to be an entrepreneur in some way or fashion, but there's still so many people out there that are just, that they're amazing employees. They want to climb the corporate ladder. They want a life in kind of the corporate environment because entrepreneurship, I mean, it's not for everyone.
That's correct.
It's definitely a tough road. And having held some C-level positions, I mean, is that something that you strategically planned? And, how did you get there?
I never saw myself in a C-level type of role, especially coming out from an engineering program and then eventually ending up in an MBA program. And I think a lot of times opportunities present themselves, mm-hmm. and you've got to decide whether it's something you want to take. I mean, it's part of that risk management process. If I go this road, where's it going to take me? If I go that road, where's it going to take me? And so I think a lot of times it's just a matter of making choices that are going to be strategic to some degree, and that you don't necessarily see the payback until maybe later on.
Right.
But as it relates to entrepreneurship, there's a certain DNA, there's a certain type of behaviors, there's a certain type of mindset of an individual that's going to succeed as an entrepreneur. And I have a son, my middle son, his name is James. He has all of the traits of an entrepreneur. His late mother, had her own business, mm-hmm. and he actually managed that business for a period of time after she passed away. And that was at his request. Later, he realized this business is not for me, which is actually another good trait. It's a very difficult pill to swallow to all of a sudden realize, gee, this business that I'm managing is not one that I really I don't want to continue in this. To turn mm-hmm. around and say, I don't want to do this anymore because this isn't what I'm about. That is a very difficult thing. A lot of people will continue in either a career path or maybe even in managing a business, and their heart is not in it. Right. And that's not good. That's a recipe for failure.
Yeah, no, it's really important to kind of disqualify things that you don't have a passion for.
Exactly.
I know myself coming out of the military, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I had a clearance, at the time, and I was like, okay, well, I had some experience with IT in the military, so I kind of leveraged that to get into cybersecurity when it was, kind of well in the beginning, and I just knew that there was a career and money to be made there, but it wasn't my passion. I just leveraged it. Hello, guys. This is your Wartime CEO, Jason Tarico, and want to thank you for listening to this show and bring you a brief message from our sponsor. Our sponsor today is Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other distribution platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now back to the show. So, what about, what are your thoughts in regards to like formal schooling and self-education? Like, how does that, and strategic planning? Like, a lot of people are saying, I mean, self-education is nonstop. I think that's paramount, right? But formal schooling in today's day and age, there's so much information out there that, some people may not benefit, some people may. I mean, what are your thoughts in regards to that?
I think I was very lucky that, first of all, I had an incredible foundational education with my bachelor's degree being at Rice University, which a lot of times they refer to Rice as the Harvard of the South. We always talk about Harvard as being the Rice of the North. The foundational education that someone gets is just your starting point. But if someone really wants to advance and continue, it doesn't matter what discipline, getting a master's degree is probably pretty important. In fact, I would say that today, getting an MBA is probably paramount to, let's say, 20 years ago, getting your bachelor's degree. In other words, getting your bachelor's degree today is what used to be completing your high school degree.
Right.
And so, Yeah, it is very important. I think what someone gets as far as their education, I think a lot of it just depends on what direction or what broad career path they want to take. So, for example, I chose to get a degree in mechanical engineering. When I went to get my MBA, what I found was all of us that had technical backgrounds, especially engineers or systems engineers, we'd walk into a quant course and there'd be this exodus of people leaving the room because they knew we were going to raise the curve. And they were generally people that had non-technical degrees, undergraduate degrees.
Wow.
When I went to start working in the environmental industry, the thing that was very unique, and by this time I had my MBA, was I could pick up a technical document. I may not understand all the nuances of a technology document, whether it was an EPA or some other kind of a document, but I could understand some of the basics. If I gave that to someone else that didn't have a technical background or didn't have the industry experience, they would be lost. And the other thing, it also helped me to understand, what do I not know? If I'm trying to look at a portfolio of technologies and I'm trying to select the one that maybe we should consider for investment, I'm going to go and find the PhDs or the scientists that can do the research, do the patent searches, do the technology evaluation, come back to me and said, you know what, the technology that we're looking at for acquisition is actually superior to everybody else. Let's move forward with it. So I think that's the other thing about having, in particular, a technical background. If somebody wants to go into finance, they want to be an investment banker, even though you might have an undergrad degree in mechanical engineering or some other discipline, doesn't mean that you can't go get your MBA and focus on finance with a particular emphasis in investment banking or some other discipline.
Right. So let's say for the younger audience, right? So for the young folks that may be coming out of high school, how do they strategically plan their future and figure out, what direction they want to go? Is it military, college, workforce, entrepreneurship? I mean, what is some steps they can take from a strategic planning perspective?
Someone that's in high school in particular, they really need to pay attention and listen to their guidance counselors. Unfortunately, not every guidance counselor is going to have the same thoughts or the best interests of their students the way I did. I was very fortunate.
Sure.
I think I was very fortunate. Maybe they saw something in me that I didn't even realize, or maybe because I was really looking for something that was beyond maybe what the average high school student wanted. But that's important. But I think today, high school students in particular, especially Latino students, it's good if they have someone on the outside as a mentor or an advisor, someone that they can actually talk to and said, gee, you went and got a degree in engineering. What does an engineer do? Because they may not have the basic knowledge about that. I mean, even me as a freshman engineering student, I didn't really understand all the nuances.
Sure.
And I was very lucky that a family sort of adopted me. I actually lived with them for about a year and took me under their wing. And it was a Latino family, and the head of the family was a mechanical engineer. He worked at Olin Corporation. He actually took me to the plant, walked me around the plant, gave me an orientation of what he does day to day. And that was probably one of the best things that I could have ever done. So I think it's that taking advantage of those opportunities, days on the job, having those industry days, or, whenever kind of opportunity to learn about different kinds of career paths. And, there's some individuals, they're wired to be in the military. Just from talking to them, and they may be already in ROTC, which is, that's a great step. That's a great starting point.
Sure.
There may be some that they would probably fare well in the military, but maybe they don't have any family members in their military. They don't have anybody that they know that served in the military. And it would be good for them to get that orientation or that information. So it's really about doing your research, doing your homework, interacting with people, just so that you can understand, what do you do in that job, or what does it mean to do this?
Right. And then for those that don't have kind of like the guidance counselors to rely on, and aside from kind of just doing the homework, or do you have any, ideas where they can find, people that, can help them make those decisions on how to get that path started?
Yeah. If they don't have the resources within a school, or those resources just absolutely stretch really thin,
Sure.
then the question that an individual can ask is, where are there some nonprofit organizations or other organizations that are out there that can help provide information about career paths,
right,
or education? Who can I speak to about that?
Right.
There's certainly a lot of nonprofits out there now, and a lot of organizations that's part of their charter, that's part of their mission, or even just going to a university and, a Hispanic Serving Institution or HBCU.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And saying, I'm a junior in high school. I'd like to talk to maybe some professors, or can I sit in on some classes? And most universities will do that. Most universities will open their doors to prospective students because they want to recruit. They want to recruit those students. And that junior year is the ripe time for them to start having that conversation with that prospect.
So, one idea that just kind of popped in my head as we're having this discussion is LinkedIn. Just going to LinkedIn, mm-hmm. finding people with the careers that you have, or are questioning or thinking, considering about pursuing, sending them, a friend request, and then maybe interviewing them or asking them to, spare a little bit of their time to kind of help explain what they do and how they got to where they are. I think that, because that's also kind of ties in that technical piece of it. How do you figure that out? So, yeah,
I think LinkedIn has become a really good platform. I don't like to call it a social media platform, although it really kind of is to some degree. But it really is about networking, finding people that are in particular industries or particular functions, or maybe even particular organizations. I think where there may be a challenge, especially for someone that's in high school, is because of that age. I think a lot of professionals that are on LinkedIn might be a little hesitant to, let's say, begin a relationship with someone that's still in high school. And it's just mainly because, they don't want to be accused of taking advantage of a minor, or engaging in a relationship with a minor. And even though it's still above board, it's still about, education, it's still about professionals. And that's why it's really kind of incumbent about the schools to create those safe havens where you might bring a pool or a cadre of mentors or potential mentors or advisors that can meet with students. And you might rotate even the people that are being invited, so that you're not burning them out. You bring in, okay, this coming week, we're going to have people that have engineering backgrounds or science backgrounds. This coming, we're going to have people in the music industry. This, coming week, people in healthcare. It's really important, I think, to try to get students, especially high school students, that exposure early on before they get to college. Doesn't mean that while they're in college, they still can't develop that sense of, well, what do you do in this career? What do you do in that career? Right. Problem is, you got maybe about a 2-year window before you have to declare your major. You might come in as a mechanical engineer or a science major. By the time you complete your sophomore year, you need to declare that, because you're going to start taking your core courses. And you need to kind of figure out what you're going to do. To figure out what you're going to do. Yeah.
So what about entrepreneurs? Like what can they do, to find that kind of guidance? I know when I first started out, I was lucky enough to have my father who was an entrepreneur. So I learned a lot of kind of those old school website, social media, ways of networking and how to start a business and being entrepreneurial. But I guess what recommendations you have to strategically think about finding, someone like yourself? How can people come find people like you that can help them grow and think strategically and develop their entrepreneurial endeavors?
So I think that's a great question. And there's not like any one track or any one pool to be able to target. It's kind of more of a multiple sort of a resource that you're going to be targeting. So one would be a chamber of commerce, whether it's a Hispanic chamber, or, some other organization, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, the local chamber. It doesn't, if you're a Latino, that doesn't mean that you're relegated only to looking at Hispanic chambers. No, join your local chamber. Within Northern Virginia, there's at least 3 or 4
Yeah.
And, as a nonprofit, as a corporate member, I participate in those. I still contribute. I still get involved. I interact with small businesses. The other one is to interact in professional networks, especially those that are more focused around business. Although if you're in a particular industry, getting a part of that network of people in that industry. I used to be a part of one that was in the print services industry because that's what we did. I was part of at Linden Resources. We had a print services team. So I was a part of that. But again, it just sort of depends what your interests are, the type of business that you have. But the thing that I always tell, especially small business owners, some of the best lessons you're going to learn are from other small business owners. Don't reinvent the wheel. Avoid making the same mistakes that they did. And they'll tell you, don't do this, don't do that, but do this and do that. And not everything is going to be the same for every small business, but at least those are lessons that can be applied, especially someone that's trying to navigate, where do I want to end up? What kind of business do I want to have? Doing just the basics of market research, competitor analysis, what is the market? I mean, it's one thing to start up a small business and saying, this is what I want to sell. You put up a website, you have your pricing, and nobody's buying. Why? Because there's not a market for that.
Exactly.
So those are just some of the basics.
Absolutely. No, I like that point, just finding other people that have had those businesses and learning from them. When I was first started becoming entrepreneur, one of the first things I did was really focus on trying to find someone like yourself, right? And what I discovered was the SBA has, I think it's called the SCORE program, and they match you with people from the industry that they're retired. They've kind of gone through the entire, process in that career field, and then they mentor. They're contributing back, and they're more than happy to help aspiring entrepreneurs, grow their business, help them overcome, and and they'll contribute some time to you on a monthly basis, and they do a pretty good job trying to match you. So what about the time that it takes, right? Having worked for multiple startups, and then, for climbing the corporate ladder, having to work with multiple startups, are there similarities in the time and dedication it takes to climb the corporate ladder and entrepreneurship?
I would say that in a corporate environment, especially in a corporate career path, it's no longer linear the way it used to be. It used to be you came in as an entry-level professional in a particular function. You might move up a couple of steps over a period of time in that function. You might reach a point where you're no longer the specialist, and you might have an opportunity to move more into the management side, or you want to continue in the specialist side. It was a very linear process. I would say today's corporate environment is extremely non-linear. In fact, I'm seeing where the trend, and I think this is going to continue, is more like hiring a hired gun, where somebody, a company says, I really need somebody that's really strong in user experience. I need a UX researcher. They bring in somebody on a contract basis. They try them out for 6 months. After the 6 months, I'd say, you know what? We want to make this role full time. Are you willing to stay on board? Yes, I am. And so they stay on board. But they may only stay on board for maybe a couple of years. Something might change within the company. You know what? We're no longer gonna staff our UX researchers in New York. We're getting ready to move to Ireland, or we're moving somewhere else. You might have the opportunity to apply for that job if you wish, but it'll mean relocation. We don't know whether we're going to be providing that. And so I think today's corporate environment is no longer a nonlinear process.
Right.
A linear process. It's much more nonlinear. So to hear someone today that said, I'm celebrating my 35th anniversary with a company is an anomaly.
Right. It is. Really is.
They are really few and far between now. I'm not saying that they don't exist. They do.
Exactly.
But I think the company of tomorrow, let's say in another 20 or 30 years, let's say 20 years from now, are you going to find individuals that 20 years from now, they started today and they can say, yeah, I've been with this company 20 years. I would say, I'm just throwing out a figure, maybe 20%.
Right.
that workforce might be able to claim that, where others might say, yeah, I've actually had 3 moves in that 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. Also, as it relates to just work life and family circumstance, some people might take an off ramp. It used to be, and I witnessed this as a diversity professional, women that were senior executives would take leaves of absence. Maybe their company didn't offer parental leave, so they would take a leave of absence. 6 months into their leave of absence, they check back in with the company and say, you know what, I'm going to take an extended 6 more months.
Wow.
And of leave without pay.
Yeah, that's definitely a cultural shift, right? I mean, even through my career and growth, I've seen a lot of a huge shift in that work-life balance, if you will.
Yes,
is really, really important. Now, having worked in at the agency and myself having worked in operational environments, what did you learn? I mean, from an operational perspective and implementing, top tier operations, what was that like?
I wasn't involved in directly in operational aspects when I was at the agency, but certainly as a business professional in a corporate environment. But that didn't mean that I still didn't have to contribute or be involved, especially as it relates to crisis management. If there's one thing that, and this is more of a parallel between anybody in the military, anybody in the intelligence community, and even at the business professionals level, is crisis management is crisis management. Doesn't matter where you are.
Right.
You could be sitting in a bunker in Iraq, or you could be sitting in a building in New York City where adjacent to you, the World Trade Center just got impacted by a bomb or by a plane. Or all of a sudden now you have rioting individuals outside of your window. How do you deal with that?
Right.
So if there's one thing that I think a lot of, in particular, business professionals are not very well trained for, is how to be able to manage crisis. And when I was at Pitney Bowes, I happened to be in New York on 9/11. I was there for a conference. And I had one of my employees in Midtown Manhattan, still far enough away from ground zero, but still they were in New York. So I immediately called him and I said, I don't care what it costs, get in a cab and get the hell out of there.
Wow.
It just so happened that while that was happening, that same week, we were planning to have an event, a Hispanic heritage event at Pitney Bowes. And it was supposed to be like maybe around mid-September or later than mid-September. So maybe around towards the end of September. So like maybe the 25th or something like that.
Wow.
So I get a call from Pitney Bowes headquarters, and they had a crisis management team already working things. And they said, we're evaluating all the various processes, where our employees are, things that are on the calendar. And one of the general managers who lost employees in the World Trade Center wants you to cancel your event.
Wow.
And I said, tell me why. They said, well, because it's celebratory. I said, no, it's not celebratory. It's about educational opportunities for high school kids for exhibiting their artwork. And it's also a networking event for our members. We were planning on having music, but it was going to be more like mood music. It's not like, mariachi band playing. It was just maybe a trio playing, maybe just playing maybe instrumental music.
Sure.
And we can even ask them to make sure to keep it toned down, make it respectful. So they said, okay, we'll reevaluate it. Okay. So I talked to the chapter president for Nashimba, the Connecticut chapter president. I told her what was going on. I said, I want you to be the point person on that and managing the interaction with the Pitney Bowes communications and crisis management team.
Wow. So
a week later, they call me back. By this time, I'm now back in Connecticut. And they said the crisis management team reevaluated the calendar and your particular event. They want you to go ahead and continue because we don't want to disrupt business, but just make sure that the tone is respectful and not celebratory. I said, absolutely. Wow. So, even though you may not have experience in managing a crisis, you still may get thrown into the breach to do it. And so I always bring that up whenever I talk about Yvonne Zara, she was the chapter president at the time, and her name is Yvonne Martin. Mm-hmm. She really had to manage crisis by fire, and same with some of my other colleagues that had to deal with it.
Right. No, I agree that you have to be prepared for life's battles, because you never know what life is going to throw at you. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I started the podcast. There's so many people out there that are dealing with challenges, whether they're professional, entrepreneurial, or personal, and they don't have resources. They don't have help. They don't have backup. I want to be able to help people, have a place to go. They can go to my website, my Wartime CEO. They can leave a voice message, say, hey, this is my challenge in life, and then, I can bring on folks like yourself, or, to help them solve some of these problems and give advice and help them fight these battles in life. So, so speaking about the Wartime CEO show, I have a question I ask everyone, right? So, what is a recent moment where you had to overcome a challenge or an obstacle, where you had to put on that Wartime CEO hat and tackle it, overcome it?
Something recent or something a long time ago? Or
recent. I mean, I usually go with recent, but if you have a better story a long time ago, we'll take that. I'm sure you have plenty to choose from.
Oh, I've got so many. I think maybe one of the ones that I sometimes revisit in my head sometimes was during the founding process for the National Society of Hispanic MBAs. It's in 1988. And I had met with a group of my MBA colleagues from UCLA. There were three of us, three others. There were four of us total.
Right.
Two of them were from my class, from my graduating class.
Oh, wow.
Maggie Pena and Chris Aranaga. And then another one was Richard Ray, and he was from the class after us. The thing that I didn't think about when I invited those three until later, when I reevaluated that whole process, was that I invited three entrepreneurs into my home to talk about the concept of launching or founding a Hispanic MBA group. And when we walked through the process, each of them said, this can work, but we need to test it. And so we need to find other individuals that are willing to do what we're interested in, and seeing what is the likelihood of this even getting launched. Is this a LA phenomenon? Is it a Southern California phenomenon? Or is this something that can actually be applied nationwide? Right. And I think that challenge what spurred us to, again, tap into our network, thinking this is 1988. There's no internet. There's no, all the networking is, who's in your Rolodex. Right. You may not even know what the heck a Rolodex is.
Pick up your phone and start
pick up your phone, call them up, meet with them face to face. And then when it came time to, okay, what's our next step? Now that we know we've tested the concept, we went to the Graduate Management Admission Council. His name was Bill Brazenly. He was the president at the time, and a former UCLA professor. Mm-hmm. And I had Cuban coffee with him at Versailles in West LA. And after he had two or three of those things, I thought, if I don't pitch my question to him, I'm never going to get a word in edgewise. Right. So I brought it up and I said, this is what we'd like to do. We want to start up a National Hispanic MBA group. We will help you recruit Hispanic MBAs and support your destination MBA program to recruit MBAs. Mm-hmm. If you'll help us, provide us some support, and be the first to acknowledge us as an organization. Wow. And he didn't blink. He said yes.
Wow, that's so awesome. That's amazing.
So, launching an organization without any real resources, just the intent and the passion and the energy.
Putting in the work.
To put in the work and get it off the ground. So we went from concept to launch in 9 months.
That's amazing. That is really amazing. All right. So we're getting towards the end of our show here. So last question. So what are you doing now? I understand.
Right now, I work in a nonprofit organization. I work for Melwood. We're an organization over 55 years old. We provide career opportunities, advocacy, training for people with different abilities, with people with disabilities. And I'm on the business development team. We do that through our business support services in whether it's in facilities management, landscaping, custodial services, document management, warehousing, fulfillment, and mailing. But I'm on the business development side, which is very unique compared to maybe what I did for 20 years as a diversity professional, but it is still rounding out another element of my diversity experience because of the dealing with people with disabilities, which was probably not one of the strongest areas of my portfolio. And now I can say it is pretty strong now because of my awareness and knowledge.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners? No,
I think the main thing is, ask questions. There's never there are no dumb questions.
Right.
Don't be afraid. Don't hold back. Don't be embarrassed to look like maybe you don't know something, because the rest of the people in the room that might be listening to, let's say, to a speaker, they may not know either. And now you're the first one to ask.
Right.
And so it's you have to kind of be bold. You have to be brash sometimes. And it's all part of the learning experience.
Exactly. Well, there you have it. Thank you again, Henry. If you have more questions and would like to speak with Henry, you could reach out to him via LinkedIn at Henry HE. And if you're interested in learning more about Melwood, please go to www.melwood.org. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Wartime CEO. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. There's strength in numbers. And with Wartime CEO and Jason, you'll never again fight a battle alone. Do you have a problem or issue you're battling? Please feel free to leave Jason a voice message at mywartimeceo.com. We'll see you next time.